Welcome to Choose Views with Richard Chew. Get ready to dive into a world of insightful conversations and thought-provoking discussions.
As progressives, our job is to have an all-inclusive, full-on assault with all of our players.
A show that will focus on moving our political, social, economic, gender, and cultural conversation forward.
And all of our players means all of our players.
It's Choose Views. And now, here's your host, Richard Chew.
Thursday morning, progressives, and welcome to the March 13th, 2025 edition of Choose Views, 773-763-9278. I love getting the text messages from folks. It's good to hear from you guys that way. I know not everybody is a caller into a show person. But your texts are cool and they are informative. And sometimes when I have brain fog, they help me figure out the name of someone like Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Mm-hmm. So there you go. But good morning, guys, and welcome to the show. You can always email me at richard@wcpt820.com. Catch me on Substack, Facebook Live, TuneIn Radio, and YouTube, as well as iHeartRadio. Get your podcast. WCP Tape Podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. There you can get Choose Views, the short versions and the long versions. We also refer to them as the featured interviews and the full episodes. So make sure you make your way over there where you can get them. You can send them to folks, all kinds of cool stuff. Excuse me, Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, and Joan's back. So we'll talk about that in a second. Patty Vasquez, driving you home. And the big picture with Edwin Eisendrath, Out Chicago, and our other great shows and interviews. Check us out over at heartlandsignal.com, and that's where you can grab and share lots of good stuff there. And as I was saying about Joan, she is back today, 2 to 5. Her guest will be Eric Zorn of the Picayune Sentinel, Clay Risen, author of Red Scare, Blacklist, McCarthyism, and the Making of Modern America. And Casey Harrison, political correspondent at the Nevadian Courier Newsroom, live, local, and progressive. As Joan Esposito today, 2 to 5 Central, Chicago's progressive talk for 20 years. Tonight, Patty will be joined by co-host Ken Mejia Beal, and they'll be talking to Kevin Patrick, Villa Park trustee, driving it home, of course, with Patty Vasquez. Weekdays, 5 to 7 Central Time, of course, WCPT. 8:20 a.m., Heartland Signal website, TuneIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And tomorrow's show, we'll have writer Edwin Rios, and Friday morning, our Friday morning road dog, Karen Byrne from True Blue Politics Podcast, and Congresswoman Nikki Buzinski will be with us. So we're looking forward to not only today's show, which we will have in the 7 o'clock hour. Joe Ferguson is the president of the Civic Federation, and we'll chop it up a little bit about what's happening here in the city of Chicago and the budget and all that good stuff. And then Adam Mulvey will be with us in the 7:30 hour. And Adam Mulvey, excuse me, guys. Excuse me. Adam was a guest of Representative Brad Schneider at Trump's March 4th address to the joint session of Congress. But he's a veteran, and he has an amazing story to share with us about some things that have happened since Trump has been in office. So looking forward to chatting with him in the 7:30 hour. So that's what's happening, guys. Henry and I are moving tables around and boxes and chairs and all that kind of good stuff. So you hear that background noise. That's because, we're knocking over some tables this morning. Well, kind of, sort of. But anyhow, good to be with you wonderful progressives. And as I say, most mornings, make sure you're staying tuned for our progressive lineup. That includes Stephanie Miller's show, my radio sister on the West Coast, the Tom Hartman Show, the Professor of Everything Progressive, and of course, Patty and Joan, or Joan and Patty, depending on how you want to flip those. So, yesterday, I don't want to get ahead of myself. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about punching the bully in the face. We're going to be doing a little bit of that today, and I'll share with you kind of some thoughts that came my way and give some credit to one of our listeners. I had an idea about something, and he must have been reading my mind, so I'll talk about that in a second. But let's hit him with some quick Choose Views news. Henry, on this March 13th, 2025. Inflation was slower than expected. A key price gauge yesterday rose less than expected as economists tried to parse the impact of tariffs on growth and inflation. The U.S. Consumer Price Index rose an annual 2.8% in February, down from 3% in January. Excluding volatile items such as food and energy prices, the core measure rose 3.1%. The least since 2021. The report is one of the last before the Federal Reserve meets to set interest rates and release economic projections next week, which we'll keep you posted on. Metal tariffs are escalating this trade war. U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum took effect on Wednesday, ramping up a global trade war through a 25% levy on, I can barely say that, 25% levy on imports of the metals. We've got some more data on that in a bit. The same day, the European Commission vowed to impose counter tariffs on about $28 billion worth of U.S. goods from April, and Canada said it would add tariffs on $29.8 billion worth of American goods. That's expensive, y'all. And Caroline Leavitt does not know what she's talking about. And yes, we should challenge her lack of intelligence to not understand that tariffs are not a tax, that they are going to increase costs on the American people because they are a tax that gets passed on, or a cost that gets passed on, whatever fancy word you want to use, to the American consumer. All right, let's see. 8.9 million people have multiple jobs. This one, I rarely get blown away, but every now and again, one job for about 8.9 million people in the United States. That's no longer enough, according to February's jobs data. More people than ever have multiple jobs, dating back to when tracking began in 1994. The findings could signal that employment opportunities are easier to come by, but the more likely reason for people holding multiple jobs is the persistence of inflation. Now, the opposite side of that is wages are not rising. So we can talk about inflation all day long, but if wages were to go up in line with inflation, or just in line with the experience that people bring to jobs, CEOs getting paid stupid money. So let's talk about, multiple jobs aren't just because of inflation or the persistence of inflation. They're also because wages have just basically, they stagnated. 8.9 million people represent 5.4% of the workforce, a share not seen since April of 2009. Wages. Raise wages. People will stay longer, and they won't have to worry about having to have multiple jobs and other, hustles. It's simple. And that's not a middle class conversation. That's a American consumer, American worker conversation. So companies need to listen to that. DOGE cuts may delay unemployment. What does that mean? The mass government layoffs continue. And as they do, states are warning of delays in unemployment payouts to affected workers. Per a lawsuit filed by several attorneys general, the surprise nature of the cuts has left state agencies unprepared to deal with the surge in jobless claims. Unlike private employers, which fund unemployment insurance via a payroll tax, the federal government reimburses states after a claim has been verified, a time-consuming process that leaves laid-off workers without a key financial lifeline in the interim. These guys just hate the government. They hate what the government's done. But in every case, Trump got tax write-offs and tax abatements to build, both on a state level and on a federal level. Musk has gotten them through his contracts with it. They hate the government. Peter Thiel, all of these, ragamuffins have gotten them to continue to build their businesses. But now they want to take away the support systems for other people. All right, moving on. L.A. homes hit insurance hurdles after the wildfires in January burned more than 50,000 acres. Los Angeles County has ambitious rebuilding plans. Pacific Palisades was the most affected neighborhood, losing more than 16,000 structures. It's now proving the most difficult to rebuild, with homes worth up to $30 million. Finding insurance is a huge hurdle. Writing new policies doesn't make any sense at this time, according to State Farm's General Insurance team, and they told the insurance commissioner that same thing. The stock market obviously hit some perils, particularly with IPOs. This week, Wall Street prepared to kick off some high-profile initial public offerings, including CoreWeave, Klarna, and Hinge Health. Stock market turbulence and the prospect of further volatility are casting uncertainty over the path to listing, according to Bloomberg. And last but not least, the education department will lay off 1,315 workers, about half of its staff, as part of the Trump administration's wrecking ball cuts to federal government agencies. The department, which had 4,133 employees at the start of the year, is responsible for managing federal loans for higher education, overseeing student achievement, and upholding civil rights laws across schools. An additional 572 employees took voluntary severance packages in recent weeks, and 63 probationary workers were let go last month. Let me come back to something in this. The department, which had 4,133 employees at the start of the year, and this is the key thing, is responsible for managing federal loans for higher education. So what Trump and Doge and the administration is saying is that that they don't believe and want to support higher education. Overseeing student achievement, they don't want that. But I thought we were supposed to be competitive with the rest of the world. Private schools are not going to, step in there. And then this is the one that really, gets me, because this is where the MAGA crowd and Republicans and the GOP really are. Upholding civil rights laws across schools. So let's understand something. That doesn't mean making sure that black kids get in schools. That means that young girls don't get mistreated in the school system. So there you go. A little bit of Choose Views this morning with my sarcasm added to it as well. Let's take a quick break, Henry. The number is 773-763-9278. This is Choose Views, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Choose Views with Richard Chu on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Welcome back to the show, Progressives. Shout out to my man, Brett, who's on the road out and just left Denver. Not that I'm putting his business in the street, but Brett, be safe on the road today. We know you're out there taking care of folks and doing what you do, so we appreciate your version of service. And I heard something that I want to share with you guys that you guys should be mindful of. And when we talked to Adam today, we'll talk about this a little bit. Stop saying to military men and women, thank you for your service. Stop saying that to them. If you're going to say that to them, say, thank you for your service. What can I do to help? I'm sick and doggone tired of hearing folks, they see a military man or woman and they go, thank you for your service. It's like a lead balloon, Henry. Because a lot of these knuckleheads, I don't mean the servicemen and women. I'm talking about a lot of these people that use that as a default, like I'm a patriot, I'm a believer in the troops. If you are, and you voted for Trump, then you're a damn lie. Okay, so I'm going to back up a second because you guys have to understand a little bit of my chutzpah this morning. Yesterday, I talked about punching the bully in the mouth, and I still mean that, but I want to add something to it in case this wasn't heard. And this is why, guys, I remain humble. I remain forceful, but I remain humble in this show. I got a great email from one of our listeners, Scott. So shout out to you, Scott, this morning. He said, Richard, I'm just giving you the edited version. Richard, just be mindful. I heard you mention hitting the person in the face multiple times. I did say punch him in the face, punch him in the mouth, punch back. And he said, I'm sure many of you listeners know what you're talking about, but just in case, and again, I'm giving you the edited version, someone just turned it on or walked out of the room and heard, when they came back, they heard you say, punch him in the face. Steve said, Richard, maybe we should add to this, punch back with facts by doing your homework. And that's where, to the part about what Cliff said yesterday, Cliff Cash, check out Cliff, by the way. What he was saying is have your stuff ready so that you can have those conversations and you can punch with with facts. So just shout out to you, Steve, for just reminding me of that. I want to make sure that you guys know that I'm saying punch with facts. Do your homework. know what you're working on and why you're working on it, and then who you're going to punch with or punch to with facts and information. That being said, now, we're going to do a little punching this morning. This morning we have, I had this on my mind, and then it just turns out that we have the clips to support it. And so this morning we're going to do a little bit of punching, because I know that a lot of folks are saying, where in the hell are the Dems, and why aren't they fighting a little bit harder? They are. Bernie's not the only one out on the road doing stuff. There are others who are out there. And that, as I've said, and I'm hoping that they're going to do this, seriously hoping they're going to do this, Henry, and that is go into Republican districts. Seriously. That being said, Henry and I put together a few clips that you guys, I think, will appreciate in this next 40 minutes before we hit the 7 o'clock hour with our guest. And I've got a couple of leading items that we'll talk about as well. But for now, my man Henry has a clip that I think you guys will appreciate. Representative John Larson. He's been a flamethrower for a while, but I guess he decided to make it public yesterday. So let's give it to him, Henry.
This is indeed a sad morning. Very sad morning. When this committee, the oldest and most continuous in the Congress, neglects its responsibility and essentially holds this hearing today to block any further discussion. The men and women on this committee are good people. They're honest and caring people. And that's why I do not understand why you would relegate this committee to no longer being of significance and resort to saying you will do whatever Elon Musk and Donald Trump tell you to do. Where's the independence of the committee? Where's the legislature? We're an equal branch of government. And you start off with a blather, and yet look at the empty seats here. Where's Elon Musk? I'm sure he's a genius and is a very credible person because of the wealth he's accumulated. But that does not put him above the law or the responsibility to come before this committee in this Congress. If he's so great, if these plans and all the fraud and abuse that he found are so eminent, why isn't he here explaining it? You know why. Because he's out to privatize Social Security. He's been on television the last couple of days talking exactly about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and what he intends to do. Privatize it. The American people, some of them may have been born at night, but not last night.
I can hardly sit here. I was hoping to just let
what I would say to that is, kudos, Representative John Larson. Pick up the phone today, progressives all over the country, and call his office. Call his congressional office and let him know we got you. Let him know we heard you. The world heard you. Certainly those in that chamber heard him. When I talk about supporting our representatives, and we know that they have, we know what they know what they signed up for, and they should know what their tasks and responsibilities are. When someone steps up and does this, we have to be there to support them and let them know kudos for what you did, because it does a couple things. We're all human. It allows that person to feel like, okay, great, I don't have to feel bad about what I did. Not that he feels bad. I'm not trying to read his mind. I'm just talking about how we all can be sometimes. It further enforces and reassures him that keep doing that. Don't let him feel like he's on an island. Let him know. Call his office, y'all. Send an email if you can't make the phone call. Whichever, do both. Let Representative John Larson know you got his back, and ask him to ask other members of the House of Representatives to do the same doggone thing. I think that's our responsibility to do that. That's our gift to this process, is when a representative does that, unfiltered, unapologetically and pounds the table. He scared the hell out of the representative next to him. You see the clip. And if y'all want the clip, as always, send me an email and I'll send it to you. But it was when he was kind of quiet, a little subdued in his opening in that. But then he slapped the table and the congressman next to him's head was down. His head popped up and he kind of leaned to the right. We need that. Now, I know that, I've said yesterday, I went on about punching a bully in the face. And I went on about that. And I will go on about that again, unapologetically, because I don't mean walk up and pound somebody in the face or slap somebody. I don't mean that. The point I want you guys to take from this is that's the kind of fight that has to be there from the Democratic leaders across the board, up and down, state, local, regional, national. That kind of energy is going to draw those 69 million people off the couch. Hopefully. It'll inspire them that they're fighting. That's something you want to follow. That's why I wanted to bring that clip to you guys early in the show today. That's also the kind of energy with facts, thank you, Steve, that we want to take to people when we're having a conversation. And also what Cliff said yesterday. We want to take that type of energy, not that you're necessarily yelling, but that type of energy that's substantive and has some points to it that you can talk about. We don't have to apologize anymore, you guys. We don't have to be, overly pleasant about it, candidly. We can be respectful, but we can also be forceful. And I'm telling you, that's gonna, it's gonna help you. It's gonna help you through this process. Don't let anybody come up on you with this garbage. For the longest time, at the beginning of this show, one of the things that I've really worked hard to do is to provide you guys with information each day and then make sure you're stouted up for the weekends when you're around more, a larger group of your friends, family, and other cohorts. And you're out at the grocery store and the gas station and the gym and wherever you spend time on the weekends. And you're around more people that are going to say potentially more things to you or around you. That's the kind of energy that the Democrats have to have, we have to support, and that you want to take with you. So, yes, I may say bring a sledgehammer. Yes, I may say punch a bully in the face. It's meant with the goal of be ready to have that fight. And I'll give you an example of a couple things before we hit this break. The EU will go into full sledgehammer mode. This is coming from The Daily with Sarah Jones, who's someone you should follow, by the way. They are so fed up with Trump. They're just fed up. Here's an example. Speaking before one announcement, one European steel industry representative said that Brussels will go full sledgehammer because they are so fed up with Trump. So we can too. The 27-nation bloc, a common market spanning 450 million people, wants to send an unmistakable message that the EU is serious about defending its economic interests should Trump launch a full-scale trade war. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. If you guys would like this article, I can get it to you. It's a great article. But, full sledgehammer is not a bad thing. It's not, because we have to fight this, guys. And if we don't, we have ourselves at this point, because these are the cards we've been dealt. We can go back and do all the election analysis and rearview mirroring we want to. At this point, this is what's in front of us. The lessons learned are the lessons learned. And one of them is, candidly, that maybe some people didn't fight hard enough, Henry. They sat, like Bakari Sellers said, the couch won. So all the crazies, we know that 78 million people voted for this carnage. We know that. And some of them now realize, oh, my God, what did I do? And we know all the hate and all the blame that they were putting on others. At this point, what we have to do is go full sledgehammer. And nobody take that the wrong way that Richard says walk into or whatever with a sledgehammer. I'm not saying that. You all know that. You all are smart enough to know that. But you need to come with some energy and some strength, like Representative John Larson did. That we need to see more and more and more and more of. So call Representative John Larson's office today and thank him for bringing that kind of heat and that kind of energy and passion. All right, let's take a quick break, Henry. The number is 773-763-9278. This is Choose Views, and we'll be right back.
It's Choose Views with Richard Chu on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey, progressives, welcome back to Choose Views, 773-763-9278. As always, there's this place, and it's called heartlandsignal.com. You guys have to make your way over there. And right now we've got a couple of really great clips and always wonderful posts. William Muck has a great talk. A great piece, I should say, on Sean Casten's talk with Trump believing, in America. Let's see what else would I recommend you guys check out. Mike Johnson says he's an incumbent protection in the incumbent protection program. That's a real interesting interview that you'll want to check out. And then Rebecca Cook launches her third challenge against Representative Derek Van Orden. That happened this week. Democrat Rebecca Cook, who will be running for Wisconsin's 3rd congressional district, in an effort to unseat Representative Derek Van Orden, who has been doing an absolutely awful job. So heartlandsignal.com is a place to be. Great information, both clips, videos, and articles that you guys can share with your folks. Let's grab a quick call, Henry. Let's see what Donna from Rogers Park has to say this morning. Good morning, Donna. Welcome to Choose Views.
Good morning, Richard. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. And yourself?
Trying to make it. Listen. Is it any kind of way that we can look into levying some type of fines and penalties against T. Musk and his bros for raiding the coffers? Because, they're not using the courts. They're not doing anything illegal. They bypassed all the checks and balances, and they're in there stealing money to cover the tax breaks. So I'm saying, is there a legal way that we could levy some fines and penalties against this group?
Well,
so we can recoup some of this money legally. As
a not practicing, I'm not an attorney.
I know you're not an attorney. I'm not either. But I'm saying, have you ever? What's happening right now? Nobody's experienced before. So we need to look into some non-experienced
ways of dealing with it. Right. Well, so this is where the attorneys generals have been stepping up in different states in terms of pushing back and making sure that they're filing the lawsuits that are impacting the states that they represent, as well as if there's been any financial breaches that can be brought in front of the court. That's what I'm reading. That's the information that I'm getting, Donna. Now, the content of those suits, I haven't read into them enough to tell you what the content is and what the filings are. But what I will say is that the attorneys generals have been doing that. Here in Illinois, our own Kwame Raoul is one of the leading voices in that space. What it's going to reap in return, I couldn't even tell you, but I know that they are trying to be that firewall. One. Two, this is...
The reason I'm saying that, I'll tell you why I'm saying it. If one of us did something like that, if we didn't get arrested, we'd be paying fines, we'd be paying penalties. We'd be spending money out of our pockets legally to cover this illegal action. So I'm just saying, I don't care if you're president and this co-illegal president. It should be some kind of way where they have to be penalized for what they're doing, some kind of financial. I'm sure that they're working, but they really need to work harder, I think.
Well, that's why John Larson, Representative Larson, who we had that clip on earlier, what he's saying is so accurate. What needs to happen is we need to start with on a congressional level. The AGs are going to do what they're going to do. But on a congressional level, the House, the Democrats in the House should be forcing the issue to have those people brought in front of Congress. Like John Larson said, where is Elon Musk? Why is he not sitting in this committee in front of a hearing, at a hearing? That needs to happen. Listen, Donna, the challenge, and we all know it, is that we did not win the House. Had we won,
we didn't win anything.
Had we won the House, we would be able to bring more heat. But that doesn't mean that the Dems don't have heat to bring. And what Representative Larson did yesterday is one of those things that has to happen in that volume every single day. And to the point that the Republicans aren't going to cooperate with that, this is why we have to do what we can to win Florida 1 and Florida 6 and New York 23 when it comes to congressional districts. So there's a part of this that I have to put it this way, Donna, so that, folks don't think I'm looking at this with rose-tinted glasses on. There's a part of this that we have to fight to make happen. And that's why I'm saying those phone calls, they do matter. If you don't believe me, look at what happened when it came to some of the pushback on some of the federal funding. And those calls are impactful. Let our congressional leaders know, that the Democratic leaders, that they have to do what Larson did. And we have to then be able to support the candidates that are running in those 3 districts to make sure that if we can pick those off, it changes the game dramatically. I don't think people realize how seriously important it is for us to win those 3 seats. We win those 3 seats.
Most definitely.
And I know it's hard. And I know that the one that's probably most easy to win is going to be New York. But it's an incremental move. But if we were to win all 3 of those, it changes so much. It changes so much in a heartbeat. So that's part of what we have to be willing to get behind to do, Donna, is to have those, to provide that support for those candidates that are running.
I'll tell you something else that's happening. A lot of his base is turning against him now. And if we could get the momentum of us in the streets plus his base, when the Republicans are going for these talks, so-called talks that they're backing away from now because they're scared to death, they don't know how to deal with it because they've never had any pushback. But if we can get the people momentum along with the whatever attorney generals we have across the country, maybe that can help stir some of this, knock over some of those tables, like you say.
Good point, Donna. Thank you so much for your contribution and your call. Glad you're with us. Have a great.
Thanks a lot.
All right, Donna. Be well. I mean, guys, she makes a great point. What are we going to do to penalize them? Well, it starts with bringing them in front of Congress, like Representative Larson said. Y'all need to call his office and call others and tell them that this is what you need to be saying and doing. Speaking of more sledgehammers and more punches in the face and more speaking with energy and heat on policy, or not even going to call it policy, but on, the tariffs. Sometimes Republicans think they know the most, and they put that out there, and they really don't know a doggone thing. And particularly, and I know that some people say, well, that's being elitist, Richard. No, it's not. It's telling the truth. If you take it as that, then that's your business. But we have this clip that Henry and I put together that I think it really speaks loudly to the craziness of these tariffs. So, Steve, let's hit him with the CNBC piece.
I'm going to say this at risk of my job, Kelly, but what President Trump is doing is insane. It is absolutely insane. It is about the 8th reason we've had for the tariffs, and now he's saying he's putting 50% tariffs on Canada unless they agree to become the 51st state. That is insane. There is just no other way of describing it. And the trouble, Kelly, is that it shows there are no bounds around President Trump. This is very different from the first administration, where there were people around him who seemed to, I don't know what the word is, but smooth over some of the edges now. And the other thing that's not talked about, Kelly, is what's going on within the administration in terms of how they're treating the Constitution and laws. I think all of that is bad for the attraction of capital. And the gentleman from Bridgewater is 100% right. We need massive amounts of capital if we want to fund our deficits, pay for the things we want to pay for, sell our bonds, and have high stock prices. And it seems as if this administration is doing everything it can to chase foreign capital away.
That comes from a fairly neutral, maybe more right-leaning from all that I've followed him over the years, Steve Leishman, who is a CNBC contributor, and he is an economist, business journalist. He knows his stuff, y'all. Some dude that's running around saying, yeah, the terrorists are going to be great for us. I would dare say, how about this? Here's what would be cool, is to put him and Caroline Leavitt in a room together with the mics running. and have a third party ask them both questions. And let's see who knows more and who's going to get embarrassed more about the knowledge that they have about economics. So there, Caroline Levitt, take that. I dare you sit down with Steve and have a conversation with him about what really matters in this space. This is going to sound a little ageism, but it's not meant to be derogatory. I think he's been around a little bit longer than she has been. It's not a gender-based thing. It's just, pure life, living math. He's been around a little bit longer than she has. He studied this stuff a little bit longer than she has been, this whole I'm the press secretary, Miss Fancy Pants. Listen, we have to listen to the people that know stuff. And if people want to call that, the elites, maybe you should look in the mirror and ask yourself, why am I pointing that finger at somebody? Because of the knowledge that they have on the subject matter. So here's another box checked about bringing the facts and the sledgehammer. He didn't say that with the lower tone voice, did he, Henry? He spoke from his gut. He said his preamble was, let me write this down, or let me go back to my notes. Let me put this right. I'm going to say this at the risk of my job. When somebody goes there, they know that they're right. And it's not the content that they're worried about. It's that they said it. Do you all understand the difference? It's not because he's worried about the content. He knows he's right. I'll say it again. It's because of the fact that he said it on television to one of his colleagues. So let's bring in some facts to the conversation along with the sledgehammer that the folks in the EU brought to their conversation. See, we can't run away from. This is the thing that we as progressives do sometimes, and we cannot do it. We have to be willing to knock over some tables. I will tell you that people who did not vote did not vote because of a few things. One of them is they made excuses. They were lazy. Okay, sometimes you got to call out that. It was also because they didn't see people with credibility and knowledge fighting as hard as they wanted them to. Now, that's not an indictment of the people. That's not an indictment of Vice President Harris or Governor Walz or all the rest of the Dems that ran. That's that person's perception. Okay, so no one get on me about, hey, Richard, you're criticizing. No, I'm not, because I say our message and our facts and our ideas are much better. So let me be clear about that. What I am saying is a lot of people felt like there weren't enough fighters, not that there weren't any at all. So let me be clear. Nobody come after me on saying, oh, you're saying the Dems didn't fight. No. Right now, as I said, we're going to stay away from doing revisionist conversation and stay on the point that fighting forward is what we have to do. And what Steve said, what the EU is saying, what Representative Larson is saying is doggone it. Let's push back with content, with information, and let's fight. Steve's fighting because he recognizes the financial impact, particularly when it comes to foreign money. He said it loud and clear. And how our markets have to have some of that capital infused into it domestically and foreign to sustain itself. The data's there, guys. So, just making sure that the sledgehammer is filled with facts. Yeah, I feel like I'm leaning on that because I am. Henry's laughing like, yeah, you are and you should. When we come back, we're going to talk about some other folks that are throwing down the gauntlet. The number is 773-763-9278. This is Choose Views, and we'll be right back.
It's Choose Views with Richard Chew on WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Well, progressives, we are back, and thank you for tuning in. 773-763-9278. This morning is Bring the Sledgehammer with Facts morning show, also known as Choose Views. So, there's a few other people out there that have said, oh, no, hell no. We're going to point this out. You need to know about it, and we want to talk about it. And I'll start with a couple of things. These are just things that are in the news that I've been following. And I think it's important that you are aware of this as best possible. A judge is blocking key provisions of Trump's bid to punish Democratic-linked law firms. Why? What's happening there? Well, basically, he went after, meaning the Orange Menace, he went after a couple of, or a specific law firm out in Seattle that has supported Democratic candidates in one way or another, but more importantly, has challenged his ability to use executive order in areas where Congress has the purview. So this links up to what Representative John Larson, I want to call him John like he's my buddy, Representative Larson said. Where in the hell is Elon Musk? Bring his behind in here. I just like the way we've had clips from him before. I just like the way that he speaks. He brings some heat, y'all. But this is what he's saying. We need to use our system, this part of the legislature and the courts to bring these fools in. So coming back to what Donna asked earlier, that's part of what we have to do and encourage our elected officials to be doing that. That's the other side of the call, and the other side of the call to Congress. Representative Jamie Raskin is also showing up and explaining how there are ways to stop Trump's illegal presidency. Illegal in the sense that what he's doing. The Supreme Court, if you recall, kind of gave, the president of the United States immunity for official acts and says that he can't be prosecuted. What they did not say, though, is that members of the administration and of the cabinet don't fall under that purview. So this is what Representative Raskin said in a letter. I'll give you the brief point. To your credit, you indicated that your administration would obey the courts, stating, quote, I'll always abide by the courts, and then I'll just have to appeal it, meaning if there's a ruling. It may therefore behoove you to remind members of your administration that violating court orders personally exposes them to potential criminal and civil penalties. Federal judges do not need the assistance of the executive branch to impose civil or criminal penalties for violations of a court order, also known as drag their behinds in front of Congress. I hope y'all are hearing me. Drag their behinds in front of Congress. So, Representative John Larson is on to something. And as it relates to the Muskie man and what his little minion are doing, let's not turn the White House into a car dealership. Can we not do that? I mean, the legal minds out there are saying that what Trump did in terms of this buying a Tesla, talking about a Tesla on the grounds of the White House is a crime. But I'll let Lawrence O'Donnell talk to you guys a little bit about that. We have a clip for you.
Imagine you work at America's oldest car manufacturer, Ford, and you watch the President of the United States doing an illegal commercial today on federal property for the newest car maker in America. Imagine you're a factory worker at America's biggest auto manufacturer that has the most auto manufacturing jobs in the United States, General Motors, and you have to watch today when the President of the United States does an illegal TV commercial at the White House for America's newest auto manufacturer because the owner of that company has given the President more money than anyone has ever given a politician in American history. NBC News reports a major automaker said, quote, Tesla has benefited more from taxpayer money than any other car maker by far. Now the White House is marketing Tesla's vehicles. What's next?
Yeah. So I know people are going to say, yeah, but Joe Biden went to Detroit and drove a Ford F-150 Lightning. Yeah, he did. But where was that done, Henry? Was that done on the White House grounds? And was he reading a script, which was part of their sales pitch? Don't come at me, guys, with stuff like that. My mother used to say, don't walk out of this house prepared. No, don't walk out of this house ill-prepared. So There's some more sledgehammer-ness. Lawrence is right on. We're going to turn the White House into a dealership, and the insult factor that he talked about. So there you guys go. Don't believe me. It's right there in front of you. On another note, in terms of what people are doing and what organizations are doing and what agencies are doing, there's a company that makes Oreos called Mondelez International. Check this out. It's asking regulators for permission to ignore a shareholder proposal that calls for greater transparency on what? The Oreo maker's Russian operations. I wonder why, Henry. I wonder why. They turned to the SEC to quiet call for Russia transparency. I wonder why. I wonder why. So, see, guys, there are folks that are out there that are doing stuff. Mondelez, did you get your hand caught in the cookie jar or the cookie bag? Here's what happened, Henry. They were opening up that red velvet Oreo cookie with the little pullback tab that they have, and it got stuck, and now the cookies are all over the place. So, our good friend Stephanie Ruhle, MSNBC, has a little bit of experience when it comes to economics and financial matters. She kind of cut her path in that space before she started reporting more general areas. And she had a little something to say about this conversation.
There is an underlying economics of Trump, and you won't be surprised, I think it's dead wrong. And it came first, actually, Adam Davidson wrote a wonderful column many years ago, the first Trump administration, in which he pointed out that Trump sees the world in zero-sum terms. Yeah. That if you're winning, I'm losing. And the only way, therefore, for the US to get ahead is to screw someone else. Now, we economists think about the world very differently. One of the first things I teach my students is economics is actually beautiful because it's the study of human cooperation, about people growing my dinner on the other side of the world, and in return I'll educate their children. And it's that cooperation that grows the pie bigger that is the most exciting part of economics, and it's also the part that's completely absent from the Trump agenda so far. So there's the zero-sum thinking, and then there's just the pure chaos. And this is, I learned a word from my kids this week, main character energy. This is a guy who wants to be the subject of every conversation. And the single best way of doing that is announcing tariffs at 10:15 a.m. and getting rid of them at 5:30 p.m. and make sure that people are going to be talking about you for every minute in between. I want to disagree with one point. He does have that boss energy, but here's the problem. He's not getting boss results. The whole idea was he's going to put, these tariffs are just a negotiating tactic. Show me in any of them where the president was imposing the tariffs and then decided to roll back, where he got a ton from the other country. There's not an example of it. But where I want to disagree with you, there are some people who do like the idea of what the president is doing. And those people are part of his base. Because for decades and decades, the United States is losing manufacturing capabilities. Right. We're losing manufacturing jobs in this country. That is real, right? If you go to rural America, if you go to the Rust Belt. So for some people, the idea of what Donald Trump is doing, trying to bring manufacturing back, bring those jobs back, that's a welcome sentiment. The problem is there are no CEOs standing behind him saying we're about to build those iPhones here and make those Nike sneakers and make those T-shirts. So we're missing the second half of that trade. And the scariest part to me is, forget the tariffs. Just think about all the jobs that are being lost, right? Tens of thousands of federal jobs. In some states, universities and health systems are the biggest employers. Yes. So when you go to a state like Alabama, or the University of Alabama is the biggest employer, right, where hospital systems are the biggest employers, if you suddenly cut tens of thousands of jobs, there aren't private sector jobs to have. So it's a double whammy. They're saying we're bringing manufacturing back. What we're not. We're just imposing tariffs with no jobs behind it. And what we're doing on the other side is firing people that have good government jobs. And there are no jobs in the regions that they live in to go out and pursue. So this could be devastating to the economy.
So Justin Wolfers was the economist that spoke at the beginning of that, but Stephanie put the bow on it. They both, her disagreement wasn't a hard disagreement. It was just, hey, let me shed some other light on this. And she's spot on. In those communities where the federal employment, the federal job, as I said that before, 83% of the federal jobs are not in Washington, D.C. They're in other parts of the community, other parts of the country, I should say. And I'll give you an example of, once again, another group that's fighting back and pushing back. Speaking of universities, Illinois university leaders show united front as Trump threatens continue to loom. Paul Avadalos, president of the University of Chicago, Tim Killeen, president of the University of Illinois, Michael Schill, president of Northwestern University, and Z. Scott, president of Chicago State University, all got together at a power breakfast yesterday to talk about their reaffirmation of commitments to diversity on their campuses and touting the importance of colleges as vital drivers of local communities. Do you all hear me? These folks right here in Illinois, again, don't have to agree on everything. They're university presidents. Their schools are run similarly and differently. But what they do all recognize is that there needs to be a united front to come together to push back on this craven fool and his minions in the White House and part of the administration. Last quote before we go to a break. Without diversity, we fail, said Tim Killeen, president of the University of Illinois Systems. He added that colleges must continue to engage in, quote, outreach to different kinds of communities to enable them to come in, which is part of our central fundamental mission. They have united and are uniting to stay strong. They're fighting back. They're bringing their own little sledgehammers of facts and information to the party. Illinois university leaders show united front. That's critically important. I wanted to share that with you guys. So this morning's show, this first part of the show, is about folks bringing a sledgehammer with facts to the party and bringing the fire and bringing the heat and bringing the energy. With that, we'll take a quick break. Number 773-763-9278. This is Choose Views, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to Choose Views with Richard Chew on WCPT 820 AM, where facts matter. Take it away, Richard.
Hey, progressives, welcome back to Choose Views, 773-763-9278. Bring a sledgehammer of facts to the party and bring it with some heat. I got a great text, Henry, from one of our listeners that said, Ford is a union company that supports American workers. Going back to the comment I made about Musk selling Teslas on the lawn of the White House. And then in addition to that, it was said Joe Biden was down there supporting the unions, made the auto at the same time of that event, UAW. Great point. That's exactly right. Thank you for reminding us of that, 312. Appreciate you. All right. So when I talk about all the things that we cover and things that are, obviously going to be controversial, some of those things are national, some of those things are regional, and some of those things are local. But one of the things that we always pride ourselves in is having the voices that have the experience and know a little bit about something every now and again. So this morning we have with us is the president of the Civic Federation, and that would be Joe Ferguson. Joe's been with us before, and want to welcome you back to Choose Views. Good morning.
Good morning, Richard. How are you?
I'm doing great. And yourself?
I'm doing okay.
I hear you. So welcome back to the show. Glad you could be with us again. And, right now we obviously have so many things that are happening nationally and regionally, but here locally, here in Chicago, as you well know and you've written about and commented about, we're facing and trying to deal with budgeting here in the state of Illinois as well as here locally in the city of Chicago. But take a moment, Joe, just remind people, our listeners, about the Civic Federation, your work, a little bit of your history, and be able to help us sort of bridge the gap of your background and what you're currently kind of responsible for following.
Sure thing, and thanks for the opportunity. The Civic Federation is a 132-year-old organization based in Chicago, founded by what passed for diversity back in 1894, and included among its founders people like Jane Addams, a social activist at one end of the spectrum, and Lyman Gage, the founder of the First National Bank of Chicago way back when. It's now J.P. Morgan Chase. And the span of interests and concerns at the time that they founded the organization, all sort of devolved to being a nonpartisan, research-based advocacy organization promoting effective delivery of government services. And that is a good fight that must be fought in all times, good and bad, and turbulent like these, and calm. And my background for this, and I'm just entering my second year leading the organization, which focuses in significant part on fiscal issues and how they tie to actual policy and delivery of government services. My background before that was about 15 years as a federal prosecutor doing a lot of federal program fraud work, and then 12 years as the Inspector General for the city of Chicago under 3 different mayors.
Yeah, nonpartisan is that's interesting. Nonpartisan and bipartisan. I think everything that we deal with is nonpartisan and bipartisan if the people that are involved have the confidence in themselves to go that way. Sometimes, there is I think a misread of what's nonpartisan, and I think it's my read of it is that people are taking sides or not taking sides. But sometimes it's just looking at an issue that is a permanent interest issue. We talk about this on another show on WCPT, The Family Meeting, about permanent interest. And when it comes to governments working efficiently, I think that's a permanent interest item. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Look, let's take it all the way down to the local level in our day-to-day lives. There isn't a red way versus a blue way of paving our streets, picking up our garbage, making the trains run on time, so on and so forth. There is simply the best way that delivers the most for the least amount of money that serves everybody well, equitably across all communities and areas. That should not be a partisan issue. There are differences in policy and differences in how you go about that. Sure, those should be discussed with accountability, with transparency, but those should not be partisan issues.
Yeah, they should not be, but they tend to fall into that gutter because of the people that are running for office, that are elected to office. And the other part that no one really wants to talk about openly is the interest groups that are behind the folks that get elected. And whether it be on a federal level or here on a local level or, statewide, the interest behind those elected officials oftentimes will guide something that's not the issue, but the solutions from being a nonpartisan issue to a partisan solution, right?
That's absolutely right. Look, and you're going deep here, and that's what you do on this show. Is take it all the way back to the founding. You betcha. I was listening to the promos as well. Take it all the way back to the founding of the country. The concern wasn't differences of opinion between citizens. Parties didn't quite exist in the same way, but the concern wasn't about parties. The concern was about factions. Factions equal special interests. And if special interests dominate how it is that we make decisions in government, then it becomes a kind of Game of Thrones. Who has the most resources in order to bend the will of our representatives most? And that's absolutely right. It seems to extend everywhere. And when we're talking about money and power, that's where both the better angels and the worst angels clash.
And I wanted to lean less into specifics. We'll get to that in a second. But I wanted to lean really more into the last couple of sentences of what you just said. As one that's been, an inspector general, and you've got such a great legal background, I want to get your take on something that doesn't get talked a lot about, and that's the impact of Citizens United. People think that when we talk about Citizens United, that it only impacts, that only has influence when it comes to federal elections. But in fact, that's not even realistic or possible, because all elections have a certain amount of money that gets thrown at them one way or the other. So tying that to what you just said about the imperfection of factions, what are your thoughts on Citizens United?
It is one of the anchor points for any analysis of how we have veered off the track in some ways. Money has become, and look, Citizens United at bottom says the donation of money by corporate interests constitutes a form of free speech and therefore is protected to the extent that There is regulation. It needs to be limited. That makes money more the mother's milk of politics, which means it's the mother's milk of policy, which means it's the mother's milk of program, which means it infects the entirety of our system. And if there is not some check on that, it means that those with the most money actually have the most voice and dictate outcomes more than everybody else.
Yeah, that's a brainful right there. I like your comparison. It's the mother's milk of all of this. You've got bona fides on a national level, certainly across the board, and most definitely here in Chicago or locally. And recently, the alders, and it's always like I always stumble. Should I say alderman, alderwoman, a little bit of both? But alders tends to be an easy way to not sound gender biased. And Joe, you've got some observations, candidly, about the most recent passing of the bond, the $800+ million bond that was passed by the city council. Let's talk about that for a bit.
Yeah, so about a week and a half ago, after a pretty active and at times contentious debate, the city council passed the mayor's proposal, Mayor Johnson's proposal, for an $830 million bond issue to fund infrastructure. We issue infrastructure bonds every single year. This year it was a little bit more than many years. Our needs are greater. It is really, really important that even in lean times or in fiscally constrained times that we are tending to the infrastructure needs of the city. The last thing that we would want is for our city to start to look and to function in ways that at times we fear it is becoming. We have to maintain bridges. We have to maintain roads. We have to maintain the basic functioning, and that's what that's about. The controversy, the debate was around the form that bond took, and there were two things that were of particular issue, one of which was cleared away, and that was some language that existed in the original version of it that actually allowed for the potential use for non-infrastructure purposes, for operating purposes, maybe the Chicago Public Schools, which is both adjacent and intertwined in many ways with the city of Chicago itself. That's not what the core purpose of infrastructure bonds are. The second is what did land, which is the structuring of the bond, $830 million, in which we are going to be making effectively no payments in the first 2 years and no payment on principal for 20 years, which means that we are going to be, the taxpayers, collectively in the city of Chicago, are going to be paying nearly $400 million more than a conventional bond would cost us. One, and two, it means that all of the principal is backloaded, which means our children and maybe even our grandchildren, if you're a certain age, are the ones who are going to pay for most of that bond, that borrowing, which is going mostly to purposes that will have already played out before they're even paying those taxes, meaning we'll be having to issue new bonds to fix bridges over again, to pave roads again, to buy police and fire vehicles and so on and so forth. So what we've done is effectively kick the can down the road before we even got on the road. So
that leads to this question. And obviously the alders passed it. I think it was 26 to 23, if I have my numbers right. And your, as you said, belief is strong in the incredible importance of infrastructure and the improvements that come with that, whether they be, roads and bridges. But I agree with you that pulling out any of the sort of soft language that didn't land was absolutely necessary. When I read through the information that I had access to, I agree that it can't be, if it's for infrastructure, then it's got to be for infrastructure. And we talk about, a bill, whether it be locally or federally, that's got fat in it, that would have been the epitome of it. So I'm glad that they had their head screwed on straight there. With regard to the payment structure and how this bond is structured, why do you think it got through? Given that the math, and others have said this, not representative, but State Comptroller Susana Mendoza has a similar observation to this as you do. But why do you think it got through? I mean, that's a question that I think a lot of people have in their minds.
So it's I'm going to use Game of Thrones again. It sort of becomes a Game of Thrones in the city council with the mayor when you have something that bears upon outcomes that constitute things that aldermen can say they delivered to their constituents in their ward, a field house in their park, particular streets paved, and part of what we use these bonds for, and it's probably not an appropriate use in all respects, is what's called menu money for aldermen. Every alderman has $1.5 million essentially in discretionary funds to utilize on what is coming from the city and largely the Department of Transportation, a menu of possible things that can be done in their ward. And aldermen like to be able to say they delivered specific things. And so what happens in this sort of back and forth over a big funding bill like this is conversations behind the scenes with the administration about what little more an alderman might get for his or her ward. And so it's a form of buying a vote, and it's not illegal, and this is the way it is, and this is the way it especially is in Chicago. But when you have a really close call, all it takes is one or two votes to tip the difference. And we still live in a culture where aldermen like to be able to come to their constituents basically in the guise of being a mini-mayor. And you're a mini-mayor if you can actually deliver certain things. And so if you can extract some form of commitment for the use of certain funds for a certain investment in your individual ward, then you can claim sort of that implied status of mini-mayor and having delivered. That's what comes to play here. And really, when we're talking about an infrastructure bond, we should be talking about the big things that serve us all, taking all the way back to the beginning of the conversation, which is what are the core infrastructure needs for the city as a whole, not for a special interest within a particular ward, whether you're an ally or not an ally of the mayor. What is it as a matter of infrastructure holistically across the city that we need to be delivering to everybody equally? And so we sort of go into the backroom politics of it all, and that's what happens at the margin here.
And that's also where the phrase used, how and where the sausage is made. That's part of politics. I would say that if you go to another state, another major market, you're going to see a similar means of operation. That doesn't say it's going back to the conversation about partisan or nonpartisan or bipartisan. It goes back to that is, unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, how this sausage does get made. But I want to circle back to something that you said about the mini mayors and delivering to the community, and that is what an alderman or an alder gets elected for, is to deliver to his or her community. And so that does put an added burden on how the deals are going to get cut behind the doors, or behind closed doors. Let me ask you this. What's a better way? If there is a pushback from any of us and all of us that this is not the way that it should have been done or should be done, What's the other? I'm a big, okay, well, if that's not right, then tell me what the other way or another way should be. And can someone that believes in that get behind it and say, this is how it should be done?
So I'm going to go way big here and structural in response, because it is the critical question. You're absolutely right. This is how we do what we do in the realm of politics. There's always going to be these screws turned at the last minute. There's always going to be the overarching impetus and orientation of elected officials towards being reelected and coming up with deliverables that get them reelected. But in the city of Chicago, we're talking about the only major city in the United States without a municipal constitution that sets standards and balances power between the executive and the legislative branches. That's the mayor and the city council. And beyond that, sets standards and also independent analysis of financial consequences of the major legislation with financial impact like this, like the budget. And one other thing in all of this that Chicago not having a constitution does is it leaves the drawing of districts to the aldermen themselves, gerrymandering. And what we have is 50 elected officials, and I'm not beating on aldermen here generally. I'm just making a broad observation. We have 50 wards, which at one level provides for 50 representatives for the people of the city, a pretty meaningful form of assurance of democracy, representative democracy. But here's the thing. We tend to draw those districts. They tend to draw those districts in a way that best assures their reelection. And in a lot of the wards in the city, what we have is essentially a monoculture. People of the same race, ethnicity, socioeconomic class, which means that an alderman need only consider the interests of a self-identified subset of the overall interests of the city. And if we had fewer aldermen in bigger districts that were truly diverse, an alderman would have to think about competing interests in casting his or her vote. And those competing interests more equate with the interests of the city as a whole, which has to balance the interests of everybody together and would focus us more on best outcomes for the whole.
Well, let me interject something here, because that then gets back to something that I said at the beginning of the segment. Sorry, Joe. That's where the part I believe, and I've had this conversation before with others that have said what you just said about fewer automatic wards, but bigger.
Yep.
The challenge with that, realistically, is that's when other interests outside of, i.e. the business interests and those who are partisan, are going to have even greater influence. Because think about it for a second. A lot of the reasons that, when we do have the neighborhoods that we have is that people don't have as much they don't want to see the integration that larger alders would require. So in other words, let's just break it down this way. I'm going to say it this way. I know we're tight on time, which means we have to have you back. But the point I'm making here, Joe, is that you then are saying, or not you, but the statement is, we have to then make certain areas of the city that have been underrepresented be part of another community, and those folks don't want those people as part of their community in terms of political representation. And the business interests in those communities don't want to see those communities prosper. If that were not true, then you would see the southeast side of the city of Chicago, the west side and the south side, be more prosperous. So I get that there's a reason for the fiefdom. At the same time, having larger automatic wards has always been the pushback from the business community, because they don't want to see people from other as you designated, cultural communities be part of that largesse, frankly.
That's absolutely right, and in a sense, we're talking here about the dynamics of the ongoing American experiment, which right now is faltering in a number of respects. But that is a lot of the dynamic that you're talking about, and there are different ways of going about it to try to solve for it in relation to the dynamics of a particular jurisdiction or city. One is you have local representation and you have at-large seats as well, and so you have a greater presence of those whose responsibility and whose very fate as elected officials depend upon thinking about the whole, while you also provide for more hyper-local perspective for, sort of the individual ward orientation that we have right now, the both and. But right now what we have is neither, the best of neither version at either end. Aldermen essentially can be promised fairly small things in return for their votes on major pieces of legislation. And that actually results in a form of perpetuation of the disinvestment that we need to overcome, even as we're sort of building a future. We have to attend to the ills and the consequences of the past. This is what a charter commission or constitutional commission for the city, which is the only major city in the United States without one, and every major city has a process by which they look at these sorts of issues, the adequacy of representation, accountability, transparency, decision-making, so on and so forth. We haven't even looked at that for 125 years. we're overdue for it, because in the absence of those sort of guiding, balancing principles and structures, what happens is we have randomness at the margin. And
to the point that we both are sort of indirectly making, we keep rinsing, and repeating some of the same ways of managing our city. So, Joe,
it's Groundhog Day in Chicago.
That was a good one, Joe. Listen, man, I'm glad you're well, and it's always great to hear your voice. You and I got wonky there for a second, so I apologize to the listeners who went, what the hell did Richard and Joe just dive off into? But no,
we
man.
We're supposed to be talking about money.
But we did. I mean, we talked about the bond and how its structure is not where a lot of people see it should go. But I wanted people to hear the why as much as the it, because sometimes people don't understand how we got to a point. So that's why the historicals I think are as important as talking about the numbers. And that's a way to fix some of these structural things that are out there if we look at history and understand how we got here. So, Joe, as always, man, it's great to talk with you. And, you just are a voice that needs to be heard in terms of how we can fix some of the things that are structurally not fully benefiting all of our permanent interests. So thank you for being with us this morning. How can folks kind of find you, find Civic Federation, get involved, send you emails, give you phone calls?
CivicFed.org is the website where you will see all of our work on issues, particularly fiscal issues and the impact on folks at the state, county, local, and all the way down to CPS, which is really the hot button issue of the moment, and other units of local government. CivicFed.org.
Stay with Joe Ferguson, guys. Civic Federation, great work that they're doing. It gives you some perspective, and it'll allow you to have a better understanding of how some of our municipalities work, particularly here in the state of Illinois and more specifically Chicago. Thanks, Joe, for the history lesson, and thanks for the updates. We appreciate you being with us this morning.
Appreciate you and your work.
Thanks, man. Be well. You too. Bye now. Yeah, Joe is one of those guys that is not. He understands this from a structure is not the word, but machinations standpoint. That's the word I was looking for. And I appreciate him taking some time to be with us and just to, chop it up in this space. So, Joe, thanks for being with us. We're going to take a quick break. We have another wonderful guest that's going to be with us in the 7:30 hour, 773-763-9278. This is Choose Views, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to Choose Views with Richard Chu on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Progressives, welcome back to Choose Views. Henry and I were chopping it up during the break. Great to have Joe with us, and got a little wonky, but at the same time, I think that's important as part of how we fight back, as part of those factual sledgehammers that we're going to bring to this fight and make the noise that we need to make. I said at the beginning of the show, and part of the reason I said it is because of our next guest. And stop saying to veterans or active duty, thank you for your service. If you're going to say that, say thank you for your service, and what can I do to help? What are your needs? What might you be struggling with? Who do you need somebody to talk to? Be bold enough to go that next step. As I say, go the full mile when you're talking to an active duty or retired military person, male or female. Don't just say thank you for your service. They don't say it because they're too respectful to say stop saying that. But I've talked to folks that are retired, that are veterans, that have said it's a nice statement. However, sometimes it falls kind of short of what's needed. But we are blessed to have one of our Army veterans who is very cogent in his observations and also his concerns and fears. That would be none other than Army veteran who served our country for 20 years before retiring in 2019 with the rank of Sergeant First Class, deployed to Iraq 3 times. I could go on and on, but I'll let him talk about that. Welcome to the show, Adam Mulvey. Good morning, Adam, and welcome to Choose Views.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on here. I think a lot of what we're going to talk about needs to be said, and I thank you for pushing the content for those that haven't heard it yet.
You got it, man. Well, listen, I will say it. Thank you for your service, but more importantly, we want to have you on the show so that we can try to find out ways to keep you propped up and how we can be of service to you And so I want that to come out early. Listen, man, I'm going to dive right in the deep end of the pool. You were Representative Brad Schneider's guest at the Trump address last week in D.C., and you were there to observe what went on live, not Memorex. So I'm going to ask you kind of a two-part question. Tell us a little bit about that, but also, unfortunately, you guys don't know this, but Adam is one of the fired federal worker Army veterans that's concerned about the VA. So, Adam, tell us a little bit about last week, but in a broader sense, talk a little bit about your views and your concerns about the future of the VA.
Well, the adrenaline has worn off from last week. It was an honor to go and meet Representative Schneider. I'm new to Illinois, so I didn't know him before this. But he's been tremendously helpful and graceful, and talked to my family and made sure that I was okay. And just like you said in your introduction, he asked, what can he do to help? He didn't worry about platitudes. He wanted to know what action could be taken. So he invited me down to D.C. for the joint session of Congress, and it was a wonderful event. I'm a lifelong studier of history. I was a political science major in college. It was a tremendous historical event to see all of our legislators together in one room, and I really openly went wanting to hear something positive, wanting to have something to take away, some way to see that there was a plan and a guiding hand going forward. And right before we went into the chamber and sat in our seats, I saw that come across the news, the next announcement that the VA was planning to lay off 84,000 more. And to put it in context, the first week, the week of Valentine's Day, when I was laid off, there was about 1,000 laid off from the VA. That had an effect not only on day-to-day care and services, but on the morale of the institution. The following week, before the State of the Union or before the joint session of Congress, 1,400 more were laid off from the VA, and that even had a more devastating effect. So I walked in there knowing that now 84,000 or 83,000, depending on which news source you look at, were also on the chopping block. So I was going in there wanting to hear something positive and wanting to hear something uplifting. I didn't expect to, but I still wanted to. So for those of you that have never been in the House chamber, and I've never been, it's just a wonderful feeling to know the history of the room and to what's taken place there. And the gallery seated above the legislators was where the guests were, and I wasn't sure what to expect. I wasn't sure if you were going to be seated with those of the party from the representatives who invited you, or if you were going to be seated in some other way or manner. Each representative only gets one ticket, but Representative Schneider was able to talk to his peers and get a second ticket so that my wife could also be in the room. She accompanied me, and she wanted to see what was going to take place. As it turned out, my wife was seated in a section that was decidedly to the left. She was seated next to a cancer researcher who had lost their job and several others of like mind. I was mostly seated in those that were cheering and standing for the entire time. So she and I had different perspectives on what we saw. It was interesting to hear the speech and to see how half the room stood up immediately upon anything the president said. And for the long time, I'd been naive or tried to fool myself that most people in the country, I'm sure, are the same way I am, are sure of like minds, definitely support veterans, definitely support the work of the VA. But seeing that half the room, not just the legislators, but half the guests were 100% in alignment with everything that was being said, was a stark reminder that we're not where I thought we were as a country. As you know from seeing the speech, I didn't take away too many things from the speech other than the same tired platitudes that get rehashed, that federal workers don't want to come to work, they're lazy, they're a drain on the economy, they're a drain on the government. The same things that get shared by obviously those who don't know government workers or don't know veterans in their life. And although there's a large percent of veterans in the country, and especially in the Chicago and Illinois area, it's kind of a tight-knit community. Mm-hmm. Those who have served tend to come from families where there's other service. Those who are veterans tend to work at locations or places where they feel a sense of community. So there are many people in this country that don't know veterans in their life and don't know government employees. So unless stories are shared like mine and the many, many, many others that were shared at the State of the Union, people have no reason to deny those rumors they see on mainstream media. So one of the things that I appreciate for Representative Schneider and appreciate from you is that you're sharing stories so people can see a face behind some of these numbers that are going across the chyron on the bottom of the media screen.
You took my breath away, Adam, and your ability to see this from a broad perspective and your wife's perspective. And I appreciate you sharing that with us. You were at the Federal Center there in North Chicago. Am I correct?
Correct. It's the Captain James A. Lovell Federal Healthcare Center. And it's not just a traditional VA. It's the only federal healthcare center in the country. And what that means is it combines active duty. So there's active duty Navy that can get seen there and also work there. It has the recruits from Naval Station Great Lakes. 32,000 recruits come through there every year. It has a VA veteran population, those who have served. And because it's also a TRICARE facility, retirees and their families can get seen there as patients. So I'm a patient there at the VA. My wife and children are patients there through TRICARE. So it's one of the largest, most active VA facilities, and the health care there is tremendous. When you talk to those who have gone to the VA for services, you're only going to hear complaints, and most people have good, valid complaints. But when I went to Lovell and I was looking to become an employee there, it was the first time I had been confronted with compliments and people talking about how much they enjoy it and how much they like the community and the continuing care and the follow through. So, it's a wonderful place. I wish I could have a bone to pick with them, and I wish I could, be angry at the facility, but I can't. It's a tremendous facility. The staff all the way up to the hospital director have been very supportive of me, and I continue to get my care there. I was there yesterday for an appointment and seeing those that I have been working with. So it's a very good facility, and I'm concerned how it's going to fare in the future. The first few days after I was terminated and I received a late night email on Valentine's Day, I was concerned, what could I do to get my position back? Who did I need to call? What positive action steps did I need to take? Now it's been a few weeks removed. Rationally, I'm probably not going to end up working back there again. Even if they were to undo the terminations through various court cases that are ongoing, I've got to move on. I've had interviews this week. I'm continuing to interview. Before you called me in, I was scrolling through LinkedIn trying to see what other positions are open because I have a wife and 3 young kids to take care of. But I can't not share my story because there are 84,000 more who are going to be on the chopping block. And there's other veterans like myself who are going to either receive good care or not receive good care based on those decisions. So going to D.C. was very cathartic. Mm-hmm. I knew that there were other veterans who had been terminated, but almost every Democratic representative I met while I was there, and I met a good bunch, had a guest with them who was a terminated federal worker. I met an individual who was a part of USAID who was terminated and sent home. After the speech, I sat down with CNN at a roundtable interview with 3 other veterans, 2 of which who were fired from the VA as well. So it's a growing community of those of us through shared suffering, and we've all talked that we probably can't undo what has happened to us, but we can make it better and easier on those who are going to still be working there and still be patients there. So we've got to continue sharing the story in any way we can.
So, Adam, those last couple of sentences, and I knew you were going to say it that way. Those are the sentences, that passion, that service, that give back. That's what gets people like me choked up, because it's just like you were on the battlefield, and that is something happened to you, but you've got folks that are still out there fighting that you want to make sure that they're taken care of and cared for. And that, my man, I have to give you a long-distance big hug and high five, because that is what so many people miss about what's the community of our military, active duty and retired, is that it's a community that still cares for each other. And the work and the service that you brought to the people that needed it is so incredibly important, not just to the folks who have served or serving, but the surrounding communities. What I know from my experience with my own family that have retired in Northern Virginia, that have served in the Marine Corps and in the Navy, is that they're constantly in service, not just of people who are in and active or retired, but the greater community surrounding that. And I think this is where this crazy DOJ and administration executive orders they're completely without concept of how this is going to destroy economies in the surrounding communities of military installations, military veterans facilities, and the list goes on. And am I crazy in seeing it that way, or have you made an observation that's kind of similar to that?
Well, I see it as two-sided, and I think for the longest time, those in the civil service and those in military community and those in the veteran community have not done a good job of talking about what they do. I for one, I don't like talking about myself. It was more difficult coming on all of these TV interviews and talking to you than a lot of the things I've done in the service. We don't really popularize or share what we're doing. We just kind of want to get the work done. Right. You know, when I was still active duty and my non-military family or non-military friends would ask, you know, why did you re-enlist again? You know, I have two choices. I could tell them the truth, which was, I really like working in this community. These people are working day in and day out to help each other. It's a family. I want to keep doing it. But if I said that, most people wouldn't really understand it. So I, like many others, would go with the easy answer. Money for college, or there's good medical benefits. You say the answer that is just going to end the conversation quickly. The same thing, I think, occurs with a lot of government employees. Well, why are you working there? And rather than say, I enjoy the community and I enjoy the service, and even though I can make much more money on the private sector, I take a little bit of a hit financially because I love what I'm doing. People won't really understand that. They won't understand the self-sacrifice as much, or I didn't think they would. So I would say the same as many other civil service employees and government employees. It's an easy job. It's steady. I'm going to be there for a long time. They'll take care of me. Yeah. So we don't do a good job of explaining our motivations for a host of reasons. I know I didn't. So there was a program the VA started about a year ago, which was called the Tour of Duty program. They wanted to encourage the civil servants that work in the organization that don't have a military background to understand their place in the community, to understand that civil service is as important as uniformed service because you're giving back to the community and the country. It was a pilot program. The VA started teaching it at several locations, including Lovell in North Chicago. And I was asked to be one of the teachers to instruct others on how to teach this class. And so when they sent the first set of slides down there and we were going through it, they flipped to one and it had some pictures of soldiers in Iraq. And unbeknownst to me, there was a picture of a 22-year-old me that had been chosen by someone 1,000 miles away in the slideshow. And it just further hit home that we are a community and that we need to incorporate all portions, civil service, veterans, family members. And so I don't know if that program will continue, if they'll keep teaching it in the VA. I hope they still use my picture and they use it as a talking point for, you know, not doing right by employees. But it's going to hurt the surrounding communities, not just, you know, financially and not just from a technical standpoint, but veterans and civil servants continue to serve in many ways. You know, a large portion of my church are retired veterans who have cheered me on and were glad that I was going to speak truth to power. You know, they're much older than I am, and they said they would be in the streets demonstrating because nothing can be done to them at this point. They're 70s. So what's going to happen? You know, at the school where my wife works, those who are serving our children and our families there see the value and see the importance of it. You know, I don't live in a military community, but I need to share what's going on to try to broaden that understanding. You know, 2001, 9/11 was far removed. Everyone was able to support the military and stand behind. And after 20 years of wars in the Middle East, I don't see that much support going on there. So sharing stories like we're doing today is tremendously valuable. You know, I'm glued to the news every day. I'm watching what's going on in the courts. Yesterday, I saw that several GOP legislators are sponsoring a bill to provide oversight on any future terminations at the VA. I don't think that would have happened 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think that the dozens and dozens of people such as myself, many who are much more eloquent than I am, sharing these stories have put pressure on the other party. And that's what needs to be done. There's court cases. People are standing up against the slashing of jobs and terminations. Now they see it's having a definite effect on what's going to take place.
Adam, the focus of today's show loosely has been fight back, fight back, fight back. Bring a sledgehammer and be ready to fight. And your point is well taken about the fight and the phone calls and the letters and the emails and the protests are are necessary, because at some point, and you know this from being in battle, literally, y'all, in battle, not wannabe, but real battle, not cosplaying, you understand that the more you bring force to an issue, the more you are able to get that issue resolved. And I appreciate you articulating the importance of the voices and the protests. And you are, let me just say this to you, you are a very articulate voice in this space. So don't sell yourself short, brother. Don't do that. I will tell you that as someone that wants to encourage you. I want to ask you one or two last questions as we wrap up. And this is a personal question, but it's one that I'm going to ask you. How is your wife and your wife, Jessica, and how are your children holding up right now?
My wife is tremendous. She has supported me through years and years of military. She's doing the same thing now. She's the one who encouraged me to reach out to Representative Schneider. She's the one who encouraged me to do interviews. She wants my story to be shared. She knows I don't often talk about it, and she sees this as a tremendous opportunity for my children to see me standing up for a greater purpose. You know, my daughter was born while I was in Afghanistan. My two younger children have vague memories of me in uniform, but not going away. So they didn't see a lot of the things that my wife saw. Now they're seeing me be able to be part of a community and stand up and raise my voice. So to teach them a life of service and a life of activism is tremendous. You know, I have resources that a lot of these younger government employees or younger veterans don't have. You know, I have a pension from having retired from 20 years of service. I'm also disabled, so I have some resources from that. My wife works. We have some means to weather the storm as I look for my next career. So as a family, we're going to be okay. My children understand. I told them from the beginning what was happening and what it would mean and what little sacrifices we would all have to make. But I'm positive. I'm positive about everything in my life because I know that I have a family to look out for, and I won't quit for any means. So I'm going to be fine. My wife is probably downstairs listening, shaking her head, saying, ask for anyone to hire you. But I will get by, but there's a lot of people who will be struggling and will end up in a terrible situation because of being terminated with no notice and no severance and no due process rights. Yeah. So many veterans and so many government employees have been terminated that states are unable to process all of the unemployment paperwork right away. Federal agencies aren't reporting the wage information, so you can't collect unemployment quickly in a lot of areas. So there's a lot of second and third order effects that happen that people haven't been prepared for.
We talked a little bit about that earlier in the show in terms of the unemployment filings. Adam Mulvey, veteran of our U.S. Army, a great father, a great dad, a great American that's fighting and staying in the fight. And I say this to you wholeheartedly, Adam. We got you. If you want to come back and talk more and share stories and things that you were working on or people that you're trying to help, you've got a spot here to be able to do that because we want to let you know that we support you. We support your wife, Jessica, and so many others who are in the circumstance that you just described. And we want people to be able to, we want you to be able to know that people are here to support you. If there is a way for folks to communicate with you, let them know what that is, if that's something that you choose to want to do.
Well, up until about 2 weeks ago, I was not very active politically and not very involved and out there. But if anyone wants to find me on LinkedIn, I share a lot of my views on there. That's a great way to connect. It's a great way for employers and veterans to connect. My trade is that of emergency management and disaster preparedness. So in those circles, I'm able to share information. So, Adam Paul Mulvey on LinkedIn is the best way to find me. But honestly, what if I could ask for people to do is share the stories that you come across. People in your neighborhood, your community, your church, share their stories because not everyone's paying attention because they don't have a vested interest. Share them those stories, and maybe they will have a little bit more interest than they did the day before.
Well put, Adam. Thank you for being with us. We will have you back again. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's share those stories. And we appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning. Shout out to you. Shout out to your family. And stay strong, brother. We got you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the service that you're providing.
Oh, we appreciate that, Adam. Be well and stay safe, man. We'll talk soon, okay?
Thank you.
All right. Bye now. That's what we're doing to our country, y'all. We're putting good people like that in a position like that, and it ain't right. Y'all gonna make me cuss this morning. I'm not gonna cry, but y'all gonna make me cuss. A country is not great when it does that to its citizens, particularly those who have served in our military and that are civil servants as well. A country is not great in that space. So if you ever needed any additional motivation to make those phone calls and to put some smoke and some heat on elected officials, that should help you say, okay, let me roll up my sleeves. If you were someone that didn't vote in the election, the federal election, because you felt whatever reason that you felt, and I'm not going to, delineate those and bullet point those now, that right there, of all the people that we've talked to since the election, that right there should give you enough motivation to say, I got to do something about that, because that's just not right. That's not the country that I believe that I'm a part of. It's not even a remote representation of what I believe our country should stand for. Adam's words should push you enough to say, yeah, I'm not down with that. And there's so many, as he said, there's so many other folks, Henry, that he described, those 84,000 other folks. How disgusting is that to feel? You're getting ready to go to this wonderful place that's part of our history. And as he said, he was a little bit nervous about going there to that chamber. And then to find out right before you're going there that they said, nah, we don't want you all around anymore. The courage that it took to do. He talked about, the things that he did in active duty, that some of the things that he's seen now are more challenging. So there are so many other Adams out there. And I give major, major props and kudos to our representative, Brad Schneider, for having him as a guest at the address, for the ability for Adam and his wife, Jessica, to see up close and personal the beauty of who we are, but also the ugliness of some of the people that are part of our federal government. And the way he described the differences, it's one thing to see it with the cameras and the cuts and editing and all the other stuff and the folks on the various broadcast networks talking about what's going on. But it's another thing to have someone that was right there in the chamber be able to talk about it and how it made him feel and his wife feel. So if you want to do some good right now, look him up on LinkedIn, see what you might be able to do, and find out, to the best of your ability, who might be other people that are right in your community, like he said, that are impacted. And then the third part of this point I'm making is go get that sledgehammer and put attach some facts to it and be ready to wield it, to let people know that this is unacceptable. This is not the country that I believe I want to live in at all. I'm asking you to do that. And if that's another way of putting it, that's how you take a deep breath and make your life count. We'll leave you with that, guys. Have a great day. We will see you tomorrow.